first in our rayon, which is a regional administrative unit similar to province. We were the first to follow along this reform. We first studied what this amalgamation with the other small communities would mean, what would be the benefits, and we met the businesses, the farmers, the directors of collective farms or cooperative farms and so on. And we discussed, after these discussions with the representatives of these categories that I have mentioned, they supported us. They understood that it would be better for the members of our community. And when, during those discussions, the choice for the communities was whether to remain under the guidance and management and governance of the rayon authorities, or whether to form this larger amalgamated community. And in 2016, we decided to form such a bigger community, amalgamated community. So 16 villages and 3 local councils were united into that community. And but on the other hand, as far as I know, you have less than 4,000 people in your community, which is not many. Have you thought about enlarging again? Well, we started at the beginning. We have had a lot of difficulties because there was the whole new system of transfers from the national budget to our funds and vice versa. And we later on, so we didn't think about that at that time. And later on, we were approached by one of the neighboring communities, and we held a meeting with Mostivska, Priborska, and Dominivska village communities representatives. They got together with us and had a discussion. And it was a pleasure for us that Kazubivska community decided to unite itself with the Mostivska Council. The documents have already been submitted to the Provincial Council, the Rayon Council, and these documents are under review now there. And the plans of development, territorial development, is going to be altered respectively. We understand that we are on a right path. Yeah, it's good because in 2015, when it all started, this process started of enlargement of these communities, of amalgamations, at that time, there were difficulties. People, even the proponents of that process, of that reform, even had difficulties in explaining to the local communities what would be the benefits. But as, for example, your community has become an amalgamated community, the funds are larger now that you have, but still you have some problems. And if we compare the expectations and the difficulties, what these difficulties, the most important difficulties have been. Well, certainly our authority has grown and more resources, but our responsibilities have also grown. And when we explain to the people the reasons for this amalgamation, for this enlargement of our community, we were emphasizing that it would be up now to our local residents, our communities and their members, to make decisions about what, for example, which infrastructural objects to repair, for example, schools or anything else. Yes, but my question is, I know that you have inherited a lot of, bottlenecks, so to say, bad roads, decrepit schools, and so on and so forth. we started with discussing, clarifying first what were the most pressing needs, and we got a subsidy for infrastructural purposes from the national budget, and we have done by now in each, or rather the local residents were telling us that the roads needed to be repaired, and the schools and the electric lighting should be restored, and that's what we started doing. And how did you resolve the lack of specialists in your community? This is a problem. The shortage of qualified specialists and sometimes low qualification of those who already work in our communities. What we did was we asked the young people who were from our went in search of better employment to Odessa, to Mykolaiv, and we invited them, offered them good salaries, and some of them returned, and so I think it has been a very positive practice and experience. It's been a good learning opportunity for even the leadership of the community. The amalgamated community, as we now see it, is another level, so to say, for our development. Well, it's good that you mentioned the fact that you have been learning and improving your qualifications, which is good. But as you have in total 14 villages, and we have heard, for example, the statements to the effect that as a result of that amalgamation, only the leading, so to say, village or a township that is, so to say, the capital of that amalgamated community is going to be better developed. Everybody else would remain in the same condition. This is not so. We have gathered the people in each village, and we had discussions, and were trying to clarify and to list the problems, to clarify the needs and to list them. And therefore, when people say that they need the new, for example, water pipes or better roads or their schools repaired, we are trying to do all that. Are the resources that you have enough for to tackle all these things, these problems? Well, not always, certainly, but I can say that it's, as our local budget has grown 10 times in the last 3 years after this amalgamation and the decentralization reform, but still it's not enough. For example, previously, before that, we had only had enough money to pay salaries to our, to our local bureaucracy, so to say, and maybe some very little projects and some renovations, some reconstruction. But today, we practically in each village managed to do something, some renovations and so on. But you have been in this system of local governments have for more than 10 years, 13 years if I remember correctly. Have there been any similar, so to say, surges of activism, of the activity, infrastructural repairments and so on, during that time? No, I cannot remember anything similar, because there has been nothing similar in all these years. Only in the last 2 years it has become a little better. So for our listeners, for example, from the other communities who are listening to us now, what could you tell them? How could you explain it to them that having amalgamated the communities could win better resources and so on? Well, I can say to them that we were given a possibility to live at our local level and use at our discretion 100% of the land tax revenues and some other local taxes, and we have already. We have also created a fire brigade, local fire brigade. Their salaries are paid from from our own local funds, and but they needed a firefighting special vehicle for the firefighting purposes, and we didn't have and do not have enough money for that, so we asked the Embassy of Poland. We wrote a letter to them asking them to help the Polish Republic to help us, and they agreed. Another example, in one of the villages, the individual farmers where the owners, for example, landowners had large lots of land in their ownership, and so they had to pay taxes, fairly large land tax. And when we assessed this situation, for example, 3,500 hryvnias as a land tax per one household, and they were telling us that this tax is too high. We agreed with them to lower it to 2,000 hryvnias, and we also promised them that we would renew the roads, reconstruct the roads, restore the electric, lighting along the streets of the villages. So people started believing us, and they started turning to us with their problems, asking for help. In the last years, it was so that whatever people were asking for, the local authorities' answer would be, we do not have funds. Today, it's different. Well, let me then try to play a role of a skeptic, very skeptical person who would criticize you. Okay, so what's the big deal? For example, you repaired a piece of road, you have restored a number of lampposts, so give me similar amount of money. I would do the same, and with that, with a larger amount of money, I would also be a wise manager and efficient manager. What would your answer be to such a skeptical position? Well, my answer would be that it's now up to the local people, local residents, to make these decisions, what to do, how to use the funds. And so the relations are now more, so to say, straightforward. This situation when we were practically begging with our hat in hand, coming to the local authorities, provincial authorities, asking them for funds. This has ended. This situation has ended. We now have our own funds and can use them at our own convenience. And for the purposes we consider most appropriate. So this success, I would say, it's been reached because of the desire of people, of the wish of the people to live better and basically to have another new way of life. And I think that this decentralization reform has provided such a chance for us to live better. Okay, yes, I'd say then that you could recommend to the other communities these changes and can also tell them how to do these changes. But I read about your community that, for example, the local employment bureau in your community, as you are now called the best employer of the year, the percentage of the new jobs provided in your community has been very high. How did you manage to do that? Or how have you managed to do that? Well, we were included into that nomination of the best employer of the year among the communities. We, frankly, simply were working, and a long way, we didn't do anything specific in order to increase the employment. We were just employing people to deal with the problems that were pressing, for example, like the restructuring in some villages of the assets and various assets, reconstruction of those assets and some estates and so on. And in implementing these changes, we have reached that high level of employment. Well, you've mentioned at the very beginning, you mentioned that you discussed all these changes and all these new chances with local businesses. You probably explained to the local businessmen that they would also have new opportunities, better chances for their own development. For example, if you now collect and leave with you 60% of the personal income tax, certainly this gives better opportunities for business development and for your better understanding of the needs of the local businesses. Yes, that's absolutely true, because you were given an instrument, you were given the resources by the government, by the country, and how to use these funds, how to use that instrument is up to you. But when we in our dealings with in our contacts with and relations with our businessmen, we would ask those who were underpaying the taxes or not paying at all. We were asking them why, for the reasons of that, and many of them, after these meetings and discussions, started paying in full. But if you have already done a lot of projects, probably you are also thinking now about some prospective projects for the future. What are your plans? Well, we now are starting to implement a new project. It's the renovation and rearrangement and refurbishment of the large central square in our village, and it's what we call the market square. It's in the Mostivska village, and this is a large square, and its reconstruction would cost quite a lot. As I know, your community is mostly agricultural community. Have there been any plans to somehow increase the efficiency of the agricultural sector, agro-industry in your community? Yes, we have been working on that. We sent a number of people to learn as agricultural specialists, and we have invested already in the development of dairy equipment. So we are working on that. Yes. And here we come to the investments. I know that, for example, the investment resources and database for the investors was supposed to be created. I think it was in your plan. 2018 was mentioned as the year in which it was supposed to be done. And how in general, what in general is your strategy of development? Well, the strategy is, but certainly there are certain problems along the way in implementing this strategy. What we have done was the so-called passport into which the community passport, into which we included all the investment projects where we need the investments. And now our local council, at our local council, there was a special section created that is supposed to deal, to sponsor, to promote the investments. What are the interesting aspects, potentially interesting aspects for the investments in your community? For example, at the Trostenets local council chairman told us that some of the investors were very much interested in the existing medical infrastructure, whether people could get any medical treatment in his area. What's the situation in your community? Administrative services, medical services, educational, and so on? Well, certainly the administrative services realm, so to say, has been improved. We have also increased the social assistance to the most vulnerable categories of our population, to the pensioners, to the children. And to give you a figure, in 2017-18 financial year, around 300,000 hryvnias were disbursed for these purposes of social assistance. Today we are, right now, we are talking about social services, but I mentioned educational services. Well, certainly education is something like an engine, a driving force behind the development of our community. And we have allocated 17 million hryvnias for the next years for the development of, for example, for the renovation of the educational establishments, specifically 4 kindergarten. The premises of the 4 kindergartens are supposed to be renovated. And now we started trying to simulate the teachers who are the best teachers. And we have also practically covered the expenses of the renovation of schools in all our amalgamated community. And in August last year, when there was the usual August conference of the teachers, it was for the first time that the teachers said that not only their salaries were paid in full, but also for the first time in all these years, dozens of years, the funding was sufficient for the renovation and reconstruction of all the school premises. And we have, by the way, also improved the equipment for schools. And, for example, we have bought and equipped at one of the schools the interactive floor, so to say. And, for example, there is an image, electronic image of a ball, and where children just can play a soccer game right inside the house of schoolhouse. And also the results of this new external testing system. When children finish schools, they are tested independently. That's the external testing system. It started showing better results, educational results among our children, among the graduates of our school. We have also started thinking about the optimization of some of the educational infrastructure. Well, everybody is scared this word optimization. Why? Well, but what does it mean in your view? Well, optimization in our case is going to be the creation of the so-called base school, which is probably the one into which the larger part of resources could be channeled. It would be equipped in the best way possible. For example, I also, besides that project of the reconstruction of the market square, I also mentioned, I would also like to mention another project, which is a prospective project that we wanted the provincial authorities, the oblast authorities, to enact. It's the project of the reconstruction or even the construction, practically, of the premises for this new base school, main school, so to say. Today, a school, this school is in a small building, and we are going to have a new large building, specially constructed for as a school, specialized building for a school. I can, even comparing the conditions that in which the schools, some schools function here in Kiev and in some of the local communities after that decentralization reform, I can say that in some of the communities the schools are even better equipped than those in Kiev. But besides the equipment, also the work with the teachers, with, educational community, so to say. The work with them is important because many of them are, frankly, quite reluctant to accept these reforms. They are afraid of, being fall victim to this optimization, practically to be dismissed, to lose their jobs. How do you explain these, the benefits of this reform to them? Well, we are trying to talk to all of them and to express the need for better educational services and also we would like to give the school children and their parents the choice where to go, which school to go. And certainly the children themselves and their parents usually select and choose the best school in the area. For example, we have one school that is much better than the others in our community's territory, and a lot of people are just riding there. How they are riding there? Well, they're brought there by a school bus and by some other vehicles. Well, very good. It means that a lot of positive things have been already done in your community, and all this amount of work, I can only imagine how much energy was or has been needed for that. And you being a woman, and women are considered to be the weak sex, so to say, as compared to the man. So on the eve of the 8th of March, the International Women's Day, how do you manage to combine your role as a mother, as a woman, with the role of the leader of the large community? Well, certainly, if you work a lot, you, so to say, steal some time from your family. That time you could have spent with your family if you didn't do things at your work place. And even the president started speaking about inclusion, and It was very significant for me because together with the other problems that our country now faces, they started mentioning, the top leaders started mentioning inclusiveness. And I think there was a big role of the president's spouse in this. So if we assess this role of a woman being also a leader of the community, I'd say that the work is difficult. And if we take all the local communities of Mykolaiv Oblast, of Mykolaiv region, there are only 3 women out of 29 among the leaders of those communities. But happily, I'd say that I like my job. It's my hobby also to manage the community. And I'm proud that being a woman, I do not only put my mind, but also my heart into my work. And feminine touch to resolving certain problems is unique. And a woman could see some other processes that men probably would not pay attention to. You are a successful leader of the community. What are your secrets for your success story? Well, I'd say that, for example, my very diligent attitude to work. I work diligently, thoroughly. And also probably my big desire to achieve these changes, to make them happen. So that things not only remain at the level of discussions, but there is some practical implementation. And now Ms. Babanska starts telling the traditional tale about 3 sons and a father who exemplifying the success of collective forces and these collective strength in these larger communities, amalgamated communities, include better resources, larger resources, that becomes synergetic to the desire to achieve positive changes. So we made it possible to make our community more attractive to our own residents, so that the young people stopped leaving our community and going to big towns. If I may ask you, would you imagine the reverse of this situation when, again, the previous system is restored and you have less resources and the central authorities are more in command? And I would not even like to think of that. So what would be your advice to those who have not yet used this, so to say, driver for this decentralization process? And I would tell them that, just set aside your leadership role, dear leaders of the communities, and get your communities united and make these larger amalgamated communities and multiply your resources and your chances. So we hope that your advice, your recommendation would be heard, or was rather heard by, or has been heard by the leaders of the other local communities. And thank you, Ms. Nadia, for your input, for your participation in our today's event. And Ms. Babanska said that my last recommendation would be, if you do nothing, then your wishes and your dreams would only remain wishes and dreams. So start doing things right now. Thank you.